From the outside, it looked like just another community meeting, but what happened inside that room would silence a billionaire, move grown adults to tears, and prove that sometimes the smallest voice becomes the most powerful one of all. No one walked into the Midtown Arts Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that warm Saturday afternoon expecting their lives to shift, but the tension hanging in the air suggested something important was about to happen. People filled the rows of chairs, whispering, checking their phones, and glancing toward the front where Graham Ellington sat beside his mother. Everyone knew Graham, a billionaire investor, a man whose decisions could reshape entire neighborhoods. But very few people truly understood the woman sitting next to him. This was not a glamorous event or a polished business conference. It was a local investment meeting. Residents, city planners, small business owners, and longtime neighborhood leaders gathered with mixed emotions. Some hoped for opportunity, others feared displacement, many were already frustrated, they wanted answers, they wanted clarity, and they wanted to know exactly what Graham Ellington planned to do with his money in their community. Before Graham could stand and speak, his mother, Marjorie Ellington, gently tapped his elbow. She looked at him with calm certainty and motioned that she wanted to open the meeting herself. Graham hesitated for just a moment, surprised but not opposed. Then he nodded. The room responded with polite smiles and scattered applause. A few people leaned forward, curious. Others clapped simply because they felt they were supposed to. Then Marjorie lifted her hands and began to sign. The applause faded almost instantly. Confused looks spread across the room. Heads tilted. People glanced at one another, unsure what was happening. Her movements were fast, sharp, and confident. She was not nervous. She was prepared, but the room did not know how to receive her. You could feel the discomfort moving through the chairs like a quiet wave. People shifted. Someone cleared their throat. A few attendees looked down at their phones, pretending to read messages so they would not have to meet her eyes. Graham felt his chest tighten. He cleared his throat and tried to help. He said she was thanking everyone for coming. Before he could continue, Marjorie tapped the table twice. The sound was firm, clear. She was asking him to stop. She did not want a translator. She wanted to speak for herself. A man near the front leaned toward his friend and muttered that nobody seemed to understand what she was saying. Another woman clutched her notebook but did not write a single word. Some people smiled awkwardly. Others whispered. A few stared at Marjorie's hands as if they were watching a movie in a language they had never heard before. Graham leaned toward her and softly suggested that he help explain. She shook her head without hesitation. Her expression was gentle but unmovable. Even without sound, her determination filled the room. Marjorie was not confused, she was not weak, she was not lost, she was brilliant. She had spent weeks preparing, she had studied proposals, she had read reports, she understood the fears of the families sitting in front of her. She knew what rising property prices could do to people who had lived in the same homes for generations. Her ideas were thoughtful and informed, yet the room treated her like a problem they did not know how to solve. Someone whispered that the situation was uncomfortable. Another voice suggested they should have brought an interpreter. Graham felt heat rise behind his ears. Awkward. That was the word they chose. He forced a tight smile and tried again to translate. Marjorie gently caught his wrist and looked directly at him. Her eyes told him everything. She did not bring him to be her voice. She brought him because she trusted him and because she believed this community deserved honesty. But she would not disappear into silence just because the room was unprepared. The tension thickened, chairs creaked. A man crossed his arms and complained that he expected clear information. He questioned why the team had not prepared better. The words stung because they were not entirely wrong. Graham had assumed he could bridge the gap. He had assumed patience would be enough. He was wrong. Marjorie stepped forward and signed even more firmly. Her posture was strong. She was not embarrassed. She was not backing down. She wanted to be heard. Graham felt frustration build, not toward her, never toward her, but toward the moment itself, toward the room. Toward the way people shut down when something required effort. He searched the audience, hoping someone might raise a hand and say they understood. No one did. A woman asked if Marjorie was saying something important. Another man groaned and asked if they could just start the presentation. Graham rubbed his temples. The meeting was slipping away. Marjorie paused and scanned the room. She noticed the confusion. She noticed the discomfort. She slowed her signing, exaggerating her movements, pointing to her binder, trying to guide them. She was adapting. She was trying. Graham felt proud of her strength, but he also knew it was not enough. Then everything changed. From the back of the room, a small figure stood up. Not a city official, not a business owner, a boy. He could not have been more than 10 years old. He wore a simple blue shirt and jeans that looked slightly too big. He stepped out from behind a refreshment table where his mother had been arranging food. She reached for his arm instinctively, whispering for him to sit down. He gently pulled away. The boy raised his hand and spoke clearly. He said he could help. People turned. Some smiled, thinking it was a joke. One man laughed quietly, but the boy did not laugh. He walked forward, stopping beside Marjorie as if he belonged there. Graham asked his name. The boy said it was Jalen. His voice was steady, even with dozens of eyes on him. Jalen pointed to himself and said he understood what she was saying. The room shifted. A woman nearly dropped her notebook. Someone whispered in disbelief. Graham asked if he knew sign language. Jalen nodded and explained that his cousin was deaf and he learned to communicate with him. Marjorie watched the boy closely. Then she began signing again, this time naturally, without hesitation. She trusted him immediately. Jalen translated. He said she was thanking everyone for their patience and wanted to talk about protecting families who had lived in the neighborhood for a long time. The silence that followed was different. It was not awkward, it was focused, it was understanding. Marjorie signed again. Jalen followed her rhythm perfectly. He explained her concerns about displacement and fairness. People nodded. Someone whispered that this was exactly what they had been trying to say. When Marjorie made a small joke about Graham never learning to fold a fitted sheet, Jalen smiled as he translated. The room laughed, real laughter this time. The energy shifted completely. People raised their hands, asking questions. Jalen looked to Marjorie before answering each time. He respected her. He did not rush. He belonged in that space, and as Marjorie continued, her confidence returned fully. Her hands moved with purpose. Jalen translated her words about fear, about belonging, about being seen. The room leaned in, but the most powerful part was still coming. With Jalen standing beside her, Marjorie seemed stronger, as if the weight she had been carrying finally lifted. Her shoulders relaxed, her eyes softened, her hands moved with steady confidence. She signed for several seconds, her expression shifting between concern and hope. Jalen followed closely, watching every movement. He explained that she knew people were scared, not just scared of new buildings or higher prices, but scared of losing their place. She believed families felt like they no longer belonged in the very neighborhood they built with their own lives. The room fell quiet again. This time no one looked away. Marjorie continued signing, and Jalen translated that she thought it was unfair for long-time residents to be pushed out for someone else's profit. Several people nodded at once. Someone whispered that this was exactly what they had been saying for months. The frustration that once filled the room was slowly turning into agreement. A man near the aisle stood and asked if she knew how many families had already received letters about rent increases. Jalen looked to Marjorie. She signed without hesitation. Jalen said she had read every report and believed no one should lose their home because of greed. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs filled the room, but they were no longer angry. They were relieved. People felt understood. Then Marjorie signed again, faster this time. Jalen paused for half a second before translating. He said she could tell that some people in the room did not think she belonged there. A ripple moved through the crowd. Some looked down. Others shifted uncomfortably. A few stared at her with wide eyes. She was not accusing anyone, she was simply being honest. A woman near the front spoke gently and said they did not mean harm, they just did not know what to do. Jalen translated her words. Marjorie nodded and signed again. Jalen said she understood, but sometimes people hurt others even without meaning to. That truth sat heavy in the air. Graham watched his mother with pride and sadness. He had seen this happen to her before. He wanted this meeting to be different, and because of a child, it finally was. Another man asked what they should do as a community, not the city, not the investors, the people who lived there. Marjorie lifted her hands and signed with calm certainty. The entire room leaned forward. Jalen translated that she believed no one should fight alone. She said neighborhoods survive change when people stand together. She urged them to speak early, share information, and support one another before decisions were made without them. A woman wiped her eyes. Someone whispered that she was right. Then Marjorie slowed her movements. Her hands were deliberate. Jalen swallowed before translating. She said she knew what it felt like to be ignored. She had spent years speaking and being treated like her voice did not matter. The room became completely silent. Jalen continued quietly. She said she did not want anyone else to feel that way. Graham felt his throat tighten. A teenage girl raised her hand. Her voice trembled as she asked if Marjorie ever got tired of explaining herself to people who did not listen. Jalen turned to Marjorie. She signed slowly. Jalen said she did feel tired and she cried sometimes, but she kept going. The girl asked why. Jalen hesitated, then translated that Marjorie said, when even one person understands you, it makes everything worth it. People sniffled. Some wiped their eyes openly. The meeting had transformed. It was no longer about money or plans. It was about dignity. Jalen had been translating for a long time now. Marjorie noticed something change in him. She signed gently, asking if he was okay. Jalen translated, then admitted that helping her made him feel things he did not expect. He talked about his cousin and how people treated him at school. The room listened closely. Marjorie signed again. Jalen said she understood, and that sometimes helping others brings up pain we forget we carry. Then Marjorie asked Jalen if anyone ever made him feel small. Jalen hesitated. He looked at his mother. She watched with pride and worry. Jalen chose to answer. He talked about kids at school making fun of his cousin, calling him slow, calling Jalen weird for learning sign language. He said sometimes people did not listen to him either. The room felt heavy with realization. Marjorie placed a hand over her heart and signed slowly. Jalen said she was sorry and grateful. She told him he was brave. People thanked Jalen softly. His cheeks flushed. Marjorie signed again. Jalen translated that change happens when someone speaks up sooner than expected. The meeting ended, but no one rushed out. People stayed talking, exchanging numbers, making plans. The tension was gone. Connection filled the room. Graham watched Jalen and Marjorie together. Jalen's mother came forward and hugged her son. Graham thanked Jalen sincerely. Marjorie signed that she was proud of him. One man apologized for calling the moment awkward earlier. Jalen nodded politely. Graham told Jalen that courage often comes quietly. Jalen asked if he did it right. Graham told him he did it better than anyone else could. Marjorie signed that she hoped no one ever made him feel small again. The crowd slowly left, changed, but one final moment still remained. The meeting had officially ended, but the room did not empty right away. People stood in small groups, speaking quietly, sharing thoughts, exchanging phone numbers, and promising to meet again. The atmosphere no longer felt tense or divided. It felt connected, like something meaningful had just taken root. Graham was not focused on the conversations around the room. His attention stayed on Jalen and Marjorie near the front. Jalen stood beside her, still processing everything that had happened. His body language showed both pride and exhaustion, like someone who had stepped into something bigger than himself. Jalen's mother approached slowly, wiping her hands on her apron even though they were already clean. She placed a hand on her son's shoulder and asked if he was all right. Jalen nodded. She asked again, wanting to be sure. This time he nodded with more confidence. Graham stepped closer and smiled warmly at the boy. He told Jalen that what he did was incredible. He explained that helping people understand one another was not something even most adults could manage. Jalen looked down shyly and said he only wanted people to hear her. Graham told him that they did hear her, and they heard her because of him. Marjorie signed something gently, her eyes soft. Jalen translated that she was proud of him. His mother exhaled deeply. She had always known her son was special, but hearing it expressed this way gave the moment new weight. Several people approached Marjorie to thank her. Others thanked Jalen directly. Even those who had looked irritated earlier now offered kind smiles and quiet apologies. One man admitted he had called the moment awkward and said he was wrong. Jalen accepted the apology politely. Graham crouched slightly to speak to Jalen at eye level. He told him that stepping up was not easy, but it mattered. Jalen shrugged and said Marjorie needed someone. Graham replied that Jalen needed something too. He had found someone who truly saw him. Jalen glanced at Marjorie. She smiled and signed that she was glad she met him. Jalen translated softly. Graham explained that real bravery does not always look loud or powerful. Sometimes it looks like a child standing up when no one else does. Jalen absorbed the words quietly. Jalen's mother admitted she never expected her son to do something like this. Graham nodded and said greatness often shows up when people least expect it. Jalen asked if Marjorie was okay and if he had done it right. Graham laughed softly and told him he had done more than right. Marjorie gently squeezed Jalen's hand and signed again. Jalen translated that she hoped he would never let anyone make him feel small. His eyes widened slightly as the words sank in. His mother pulled him into a hug. The room continued to buzz around them, but the three of them felt separate from it, standing in a quiet circle of understanding. Graham looked around and admitted the meeting went better than any presentation he could have planned. Jalen joked that Marjorie should lead all future meetings. Marjorie signed instantly that she agreed. People laughed, the tension fully gone. Eventually, the crowd began to leave. Conversations continued in the hallway and outside the building. People did not talk about budgets or construction plans anymore. They talked about what they felt and what they learned. Marjorie gathered her notes. Jalen lingered nearby. His mother asked if he was ready to go. He said yes, but he did not rush. Graham asked them to stay for a moment. He explained that he had attended many meetings, but none like this. He said what happened was not because of money or plans. It was because of Jalen. He told the boy that he did more than translate. He helped strangers understand each other. He showed everyone what it looks like to step up without being asked. Jalen looked stunned. Marjorie signed that she did not feel alone at all when Jalen stood up. His mother smiled proudly. Graham encouraged Jalen to keep using what he knows, even when it feels small. He said it never truly is. Marjorie signed one last message slowly. Jalen translated that people like them are not always listened to, but when they speak anyway, things change. His mother wiped her eyes. As the last attendees left, one person called out to thank Jalen again. Jalen waved shyly. He paused at the door and looked back at Marjorie. He signed a simple thank you. She touched her heart and signed it back. The door closed behind them. Graham stood alone for a moment, reflecting on what had happened. He realized that no amount of wealth or influence could replace genuine human connection. Sometimes the biggest change comes from the smallest voice, and sometimes the people we expect the least from carry the most power. At the heart of it all was a simple truth. Everyone deserves to be heard, no exceptions, and when we take the time to truly listen, we open doors that can change lives, including our own. You never know who might step forward when given the chance.